may I ask? It would be a dull world except for peculiar persons, observed the man on the settee philosophically. I've seen very many peculiar persons lately by the simple process of coming here day after day. No, I'm not Mr. Livius's representative. I'm only a town-bound and interested observer of his. There you've got the better of me, said Average Jones. I was rather anxious to see him myself. The other looked speculatively at the trim, keen-faced young man. Yet you do not look like a Latin scholar, he observed, if you'll pardon the comment. Nor do you, retorted Jones, if the apology is returnable. I suppose not, owned the other with a sigh. I've often thought that my classical capacity would gain more recognition if I didn't have a skin like Bob Fitzsimmons and hands like Ty Cobb. Nevertheless, I'm in and of the Department of Latin of Johns Hopkins University. Name Warren. Sit down. Thanks, said the other. Name Jones. Profession advertising advisor. Object curiosity. A.V.R.E. Jones, better known as Average Jones, I believe. Experte crede, being dog Latin for you seem to know all about it. The newcomer eyed his vis-a-vis. Perhaps you know Mr. Robert Bertram, he drawled. Oculus, the eye, Tory of the bull. Bull's eye, said the freckled one with a grin. I've heard of your exploits through Bertram, and thought probably you'd follow the bait contained in my letter to him. Nothing wrong with your nerve system, is there? Inquired Average Jones with mock anxiety. Now that I'm here, where is L. Livius? And so forth. Elegantly, but uncomfortably, housed with Colonel Ridgway Graham in his ancestral barrack on Carteret Street. Is this Colonel Graham a friend of yours? Friend and foe, tried and true. We meet twice a week, usually at his house, to squabble over his method of Latin pronunciation and his construction of the ablative case. He's got a theory of the ablative absolute, said Warren with a scowl, fit to fetch Tacitus howling from the shades. A scholar, then? A very fine and finished scholar, though a faddist of the rankest type. Speaks Latin as readily as he does English. Old? Over 70. Rich? Not in money. Taxes on his big place keep him pinched. That and his passion for buying all kinds of old and rare books. He's got, perhaps, an income of 5,000 clear, of which about 3,000 goes in book auctions. Any family? No, lives with 2 ancient colored servants who look after him. How did our friend from B.C. connect up with him? Oh, he ran to the old colonel like a chick to its hen. You see, there aren't so very many Latinists in town during the hot weather. Perhaps 18 or 20 in all came from about here and from Washington to see the prodigy in the Park of the Boar after the advertisement appeared. He wouldn't have anything to do with any of us. Pretended he didn't understand our kind of Latin. I offered him a place myself at a wage of more denarii than I could well afford. I wanted a chance to study him. Then came the colonel and fairly grabbed him. So I sent for you in my artless professional way. Why so much enthusiasm on the part of Colonel Graham? Simple enough. Livius spoke Latin with an accent which bore out the old boy's contention. I believe they also agreed on the ablative absolute. Yes, sir, naturally, drawled Average Jones. Does our early Roman speak pretty ready Latin? He's fairly fluent. Sometimes he stumbles a little in his constructions, and he's apt to be, monkish rather than classical when in full course. Doesn't wear the toga virilis, I suppose. Oh, no, plain American clothes. It's only his inner man that's Roman, of course. He met with a bump on the head. This is his story, and he's got the scar to show for it. and when he came to, he'd lost ground a couple of 1,000 years and returned to his former existence. No English, no memory of who or what he'd been, no money, no connection whatsoever with the living world.
Wonder if he's been a student of Kipling. You remember The Greatest Story in the World, The Reincarnated Galley Slave? Now, as to this Colonel Graham, has he ever published?
Yes, 2 small pamphlets issued by the Classicist Press, which publishes the Classical Weekly.
Supporting his fads, I suppose.
Right. He devoted 1 pamphlet to each.
Average Jones contemplated with absorbed attention an ant which was making a laborious spiral ascent of his cane. Not until it had gained a vantage point on the bone handle did he speak again.
See here, Professor Warren, I'm a passionate devotee of the Latin tongue. I have my deep and dark suspicions of our present modes of pronunciation, all 3 of them. As for the ablative absolute, its reconstruction and regeneration have been the inspiring principle of my studious manhood. Humbly I have sat at the feet of learning, enshrined in the Ridgway Graham pamphlets. I must meet Colonel Graham, after reading the pamphlets. I hope they're not long.
Warren frowned.
Colonel Graham is a gentleman and my friend, Mr. Jones, he said with emphasis. I won't have him made a butt.
He shan't be by me,
Average Jones said quietly.
Has it perhaps struck you, as his friend, that close daily association with the psychic remnant of a Roman citizen might conceivably be non-conducive to his best interest?
Yes, it has. I see your point. You want to approach him on his weak side. But have you Latin enough to sustain the part? He's shrewd as a weasel in all matters of scholarship, though a child whom anyone could fool in practical affairs.
No, I haven't, admitted Average Jones. Therefore, I'm a mute. A shock in early childhood paralyzed my centers of speech. I talk to you by sign language, and you interpret.
But I hardly know the deaf-mute alphabet.
Nor I. But I'll waggle my fingers like lightning if he says anything to me requiring an answer, and you'll give the proper reply. Does Colonel Graham implicitly credit the Romanism of his guest?
He does because he wants to. To have an educated man of the classic period of the Latin tongue, a friend of Caesar, an auditor of Cicero, and a contemporary of Virgil, Horace, and Ovid come back and speak in the accent he's contended for, makes a powerful support for his theories. He's at work on a supplementary thesis already.
What do the other Latin men who've seen Livius think of the metempsychosis claim?
They don't know. Livius explained his remote antecedents only after he had got Colonel Graham's private ear. The colonel has kept it quiet.
Don't want a rabble of psychologists and soul pokers worrying him to death, he says. Makes it pretty plain sailing for the Roman. Well, arrange to take me there as soon as possible.
At the Graham house, Average Jones was received with simple courtesy by a thin, rosy-cheeked old gentleman with a dagger-like imperial and a dreamy eye, who, on Warren's introduction, made him free of the unkempt old place's hospitality. They conversed for a time, Average Jones maintaining his end with nods and gestures, and, ostensibly, through the digital mediumship of his sponsor. Presently, Warren said to the host,
"And where is your visitor from the past?"
"Prowling among my books," answered the old gentleman.
"Are we not going to see him?"
The colonel looked a little embarrassed.
"The fact is, Professor Warren, Livius has taken rather an aversion to you."
"I'm sorry. How so?"
A twinkle of malice shone in the old scholar's eye.
"He says that your Latin accent frets his nerves," he explained.